Welcome to the Current Veterans Oral History Project.
No, I'm not quite clearly understanding you.
Welcome to the Current Veterans History Project.
Well, okay, thank you.
My name is John.
Mine is too. Also John.
John Prince, and you are?
Good. John Boydston.
Okay.
Senior.
Could you start by telling us your birth date?
I'm sorry.
Your birth date?
Your birthday.
Oh, January 10th, 1920.
Okay. What wars and what branch did you serve in?
I served in the U.S. Army Air Corps in January 2nd, 1942 to I think October 24th. I'm not sure the October date. In fact, it's probably November 24th because it's just before Thanksgiving, 1945.
In which war did you serve in?
World War II.
Okay. What was your highest rank while you were in service?
What was my wife?
Your highest rank?
Captain.
Okay. Where did you serve? In the Pacific Theater or European?
Yes, I served all over the United States and in Great Britain, in France, and Germany.
Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I volunteered.
Okay. Where did you enlist? Like in a movie theater or?
I beg your pardon?
Where did you enlist? Like.
I enlisted in Mentorfield, Bakersfield, California.
Okay. Where were you living at the time?
In Bakersfield.
Why did you join?
Because the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, and I knew I'd be in the draft, and the major out here at Mentorfield told me I could play in the band for the duration of the war.
Why did you choose the Army Air Corps?
Because I couldn't get into the Navy because of my glasses. So the Air Corps was, I liked flying better than marching, and I thought the Air Force, I could see the world.
Do you recall your first days in the service?
My first base was Mentorfield.
Your first days. Your first days in the service?
Yes, I recall the whole service pretty good.
Could you tell us the story of your first few days?
How much time you got?
We've got
All right, I'll start out. It's an interesting story. I took my trumpet out there in Mentorfield and never got it out of my case. I was there for 2 days and they sent me down to Fort MacArthur at San Pedro, California. There I learned how to wash dishes and shoot crap. And then they sent me with some others, I don't know who, to Wichita Falls, Texas at Shepherd Field, Texas. And there I learned to march and go through boot camp. And there they sent me to Will Rogers Field, California. I'm at Will Rogers Field, Oklahoma City. And there I became a clerk because I had taken typing in high school. And I was with the 325th Material Squadron, as far as I can remember. Well, I better go on and not tell you about that. But anyway, I went from there to Officers Candidate School in Miami, Florida. And from there, I went to Officers Candidate School at Harvard University in the Harvard Business School at Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I graduated as a second lieutenant. Then I was sent to San Francisco, California, and stationed for a few days out at at Hamilton Field near San Rafael, about 30 miles north of San Francisco. And then they called me back in and sent me to be the statistical officer of the 77th Fighter Squadron, or the 4th Fighter Group, in Payne, Washington. Then I was sent, took a troop train, a caravan of trucks, to Pendleton Field, Oregon. And then I was called into San Francisco again and sent out to Hamilton Field again to help form a new fighter group, the 354th Fighter Group. And there we went to Tonopah, Nevada, at Tonopah Air Base, to get our pilots, because we only had group headquarters and some flight leaders and sergeant majors before leaving Hamilton Field. So our whole group kind of formed either on the way or when we got to Tonopah, Nevada. And we got pilots in from various schools, and I assigned each one of them to a various squadron. We had a group headquarters of about 35 people, and 3 squadrons of about 300 people each. And we went from there to Santa Rosa, California, and they flew practice flights in the P-39 airplane. We lost some fellows who had graduated from the various schools by piloting a touchy airplane and spinning in while they're in training. And then we were sent to Payne Field, Washington, to Pendleton, Oregon. And there we had our final training. And from there we went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and after about a week off, this was about around north New York City, they put us on a ship called the Athlone Castle, and we floated across the Atlantic, pitch black at night, with a whole armada. Our group commanded the whole ship. Our group commander was the commander of all the troops on the ship, which include fighter pilots as well as our fighter group. And then we landed in Liverpool. I think we had some problems going across the Atlantic. That's beside the point. In London, in Liverpool, they took us and we were about a week or two in a castle, but no heat. And it was freezing. I mean, we felt like we were freezing. Wasn't any frost, but it was cold, no heat. Anyway, they took us to Boxstead, which is out on the English Channel and near Colchester. And from there, we got in our planes. And as my cap will show, we were the Pioneer Mustang Group, the first Mustang group in the European theater to get the Mustang. And that group shot down 701 planes in head-to-head combat. A very famous group. I can take no credit except giving them service, assigning them to the squadron, and getting replacements when some were shot down or whatever the deal was. also the armors and the various helpers for the airplane. And after Boydston, we were sent to southern England, getting ready for the invasion, and down in Maidstone. And from there, we were the first fighter group on the continent after D-Day. We were at Station A2 in Normandy. We were really about 20 miles, 30 miles from Normandy. We were the first fighter group on the continent. And from there we went to Brittany, France, and at that time we shot down our 500th airplane, had a great celebration, and I was promoted to captain. I had been changed from a statistical officer to a special service officer. And because, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, there's a reason for all that. And then we went from there to a base by the Marne River in France. Went through Paris on the Marne River. And there the river overflowed, and we went north to the edge of Germany at a station between Nancy and Metz, France, called Rosiers, R-O-S-I-E-R-S. And there, we were there when the Battle of the Bulge was on, and we were told they're about to break through, and we had no defense except pistols and carbines. But anyway, they didn't break through. Our army held up. We won the Battle of the Bulge. From there, we went to Frankfurt, Germany, and then down to Ansbach, Germany, to the most decorated fighter base in Germany, which was von Richthofen's base, who was the leading ace in World War I for Germany. And we had a very good base there. And from there, we won the war. That's when victory in Europe went over. We felt the war was over when we won the war. Anyway, from there, we went to Herzogenaurach. That's near Nuremberg and Fürth. Fürth is spelled F-I-R-T-H. And we enjoyed a good after the war trip. And from there, I went to the debarkation in France, back to United States, and flew home in command of about 14 Californians who were sent various places. When we got home, I never saw any of them again. Up to Beale Field, California, up by Sacramento. And from there, I was sitting there, and a guy came in shouting, Captain Boydston, Captain Boydston. I said, yeah, I'm Captain Boydston. He said, you've just been promoted to major. I said, I have? Good. He said, you can accept promotion now, and you'll be deactivated, or you can go take your terminal leave, still as captain, and be promoted in February. I said, well, what's the difference? Your choice. I said, well, I'll stay as captain. I get paid. Don't get paid for major if I get out now, right? I said, that's right. So I went in, was transferred into the reserve, and was to be promoted captain in February. Well, that major, it never came. So I went up to San Francisco. Hamilton Field was still operating there then. It's not now. And asked them for why I didn't get my majority. And they said, because you were court-martial. We gave it to one of our guys. and I didn't debate it, but I was court-martialed over in Germany, but I was held innocent. And that was getting troops to carry supplies, because I was also put in charge of the post exchange and all the ball games at the theater and all that. And it didn't work out. And I asked, I heard you could get trucks. People were turning in trucks. And offered a guy a bottle of whiskey for a truck. He refused, but he told his commanding officer, and he turned me in and had a general court-martial, but I was declared innocent. So that is kind of my story there. And that's, I wound up in Bakersfield, where I was when I went in. Sold real estate.
Okay.
With my father.
Do you remember if there was very many casualties in your unit?
Pardon?
Were there very many casualties in your unit?
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Cuts?
Casualties. Deaths.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we shot down 701 planes, and I should get the total. I think we lost about 300. We lost a lot of good friends. It's like, you're my friend, see you today, you don't see me tomorrow, never will again. It was common, the very first flight we had in our group, we lost a major, head of one of our squadrons, and his wingman, flying over Germany, didn't meet any combat. Flying back, they ran out of gas and sunk in the English Channel. And that put a quietus over us. About a flight or two later, our group ran into a group of juries, and we came home and the pilots reported, we lost 2 men and killed 14. And from then on, our group was not guys worrying about going out. We remember how many are going to get tomorrow. That was their attitude. Our guys got so built up, and they're like a championship football team. And we were really a very enthusiastic and happy group. A couple of our guys on leave, enlisted men, got dinged by the military police one time for not being a little out of uniform. Didn't have their tie tied or something. Commanding officer called him in and he said, look, don't worry about that. You're not going to be punished. You just get these planes in the top shape they can be so we can kill all those juries. That's the kind of outfit we had. We had a real sporting outfit. What else?
How did you stay in touch with your family?
How did you stay in touch with your family?
With my family? My mother wrote to me and she sent me cookies, but my roommates stole the cookies before I get to them. So. And I would get a letter off to them now and then. I'm ashamed in a way I didn't write more, but you couldn't tell very much. I followed the rules in that respect particularly. I did not write letters and tell anything that would get our group in trouble. I wore my dog tags in case we were captured. What's the next question?
What was the food like?
What?
What was the food like?
The food was not bad. In England, I know I was very jealous because pilots who I outranked got eggs for breakfast, and all I get was pancakes, no breaks, or sea rations. Sea rations is just kind of a meal deal.
Mm-hmm.
The food was good after the war. In fact, after the war at Urskanaga, on our base there, I had my own little house and a driver and a German car. Well, I think it was yeah, it was a France car. And as I say, we were all taken care of after the war. And one of my roommates was the club officer, so he had access to any liquid refreshments we needed. And my other roommate I put in my house with me was a squadron adjutant who also was the head of all the food in his squadron, and we had plenty of good meat to eat and other good food.
Remember, ask him. What's his name?
John.
John. Downstairs, you talked about the point system.
Yes.
Can you explain that and how? Do you remember how that worked?
Okay. I think the reason I got more points was because I was, first of all, an enlisted man before I was an officer. Our group was made up mostly of officers, and I probably entered the service before most of the pilots. And because I entered in January, a lot of them entered maybe March or April or something like that. Also, I departed with the honorable, what do they call it, an honorable discharge anyway, from the Army, I guess it was. I had to be discharged from the Army to go into the Air Corps itself. And yeah, I guess we were just in training to begin with. So one other fellow, I don't know his background, a communication officer of the 356 Fighter Squadron. We were in the club, officers club one night, and he poured, scotch was only 10 cents a shot. So he wasn't really very big in this. He poured a glass of scotch in my pocket. I said, "What'd you do that for, Rex?" He says, "I want to get your attention." He says, "You and I got the points. We can go home." I said, "We have?" I hadn't even thought about points. "Yeah, we got more points than anybody." So I said, "Well, I'm going home." And he said, he's going home. And I lost a lot of stuff on the way home that I had collected, guns and so forth. I got some of them home, but I think the fellows on the way home inspected and decided they needed more than I did. Anyway, as I told you, maybe I didn't tell you, I was told if I would stay 60 days that I could be promoted to a lieutenant colonel, because the group was splitting up. They were sending some of our pilots to the Japanese area, and others were there to just take care of the base. We were folding it up. So I didn't want to stay. I gave myself a 10-day pass to Paris and wrote my own orders and took off rather than staying there and being promoted to lieutenant colonel. Now, whether they told me the truth or not, I don't know. I didn't test them. But the group headquarters, the adjutant told me. So that was the deal. But I said, no, I want to get home as soon as I can. Besides, there was winter coming on. It's cold over there in the winter in Germany. It's getting cold there. Herzogenaurach. Next question.
Do you remember where you were when the war ended?
Yes, told you that. I'm in Ansbach, German,
Right.
at the Richthofen Air Base. It's got another name, but now I've been back there since the war, and I think that there's another type of German army on that base now. But they were nice to us. I've been back to several reunions of my fighter group. And one of them, we went back to Europe. In fact, at least two of them went back to Europe.
Okay.
Saw our old bases. And we were welcomed. Really, the Germans really appreciated us. I mean, not the Germans. Excuse me. The English really appreciated us. More so than the France.
Did you continue your education after you joined the military?
Did you continue your education after the military?
Yes, somewhat. Somewhat. In fact, I was invited to go back to Washington, D.C. Or to Harvard. I'm not sure which one, by a Harvard professor who was trying to form a group with the statistical officers who graduated from Harvard Business School during the war and be a group. But I was busy selling real estate. I didn't have time to go back there. And so I dropped that. I also, though, did become a mortgage banker, or mortgage broker, excuse me. And I attended a class in Stanford University. It wasn't a military class. And I also joined the reserves out here, but they didn't do anything. And when I couldn't get my majority promotion, I departed from the Air Corps Reserve. I thought they did me wrong. Because I didn't ask for being promoted. They came by and told me I was going to be, then took it away.
Has your time in the service influenced your thoughts on anything?
Has your time in the service influenced your thoughts on virtually anything?
Oh, a lot. It's hard to describe, but as I say, I was very fortunate to be associated with a group of fine young men, many who would have been fine leaders when they got home, and they were killed. And I'm talking about pilots. I don't think we lost any of our enlisted men, except it's a possibility, I don't remember. We were a group that went, we were pretty well protected. We were protected by a whole flotilla of about 20 warships when we went across the ocean. We were a privileged group from the very beginning, once we formed it, because our commanding officer, a colonel at the end, Colonel Martin, he saw to it our pilots, if they flew for 52 minutes or 55, they put down 52 minutes or 55. They didn't put down an hour. Our group was probably the most precisely trained group that went over there. And we took, as another thing, a very minor thing, I liked to hunt a bit while I was a kid, when I was older, growing up. Before we went over, they had all of us officers, I don't know if they had enlisted men too, but all of us officers take a brief training course in gunnery. And I got to be expert in the 45, expert in the carbine, and I don't know which is the highest, and a sharpshooter in a machine gun. And one of our guys said, the Germans are going to be scared from us when we get all our reports of our deals with guns. Well, we never fought on the ground at all. Next question.
Have you joined any veterans organizations?
Have you joined any veterans organizations?
No, I am not.
Okay.
And a funny thing is, I don't remember being asked to join. If one of them would have come to me, and I know several are there, several guys in American Legion. I don't know of any in the Veterans of Foreign Wars, but they should be. But they send letters out and everything, but no personal people in town have asked me to join a veterans organization. And I've got some good friends, some still alive, that belong. But that's their problem. I'm in about 20 or 30 different organizations that I help, like Bakersfield College, University of California, Berkeley, alumni, the Kiwanis Club, the Christian Businessmen's Club, what all am I in? I'm in all kinds of deals. So if I'd been invited, I'd probably join, but I didn't. Another reason why I didn't join is that when I was a boy, I lived in Brawley, California, and the American Legion was just known, probably because my mother was a little prejudiced, for their wild parties. And so I thought, I don't have time for a bunch of wild parties, so why go and put myself doing extra work when I don't have time? And I've done a lot of church work in different churches.
Well, is there anything else you would like to add to the interview?
What?
Is there anything else you would like to add?
Any experiences that stand out in your mind?
Well, I can't think on the top of my head. You know, I'm old and crumbling like an old building. There are a lot of things come up, remembrances. I remember I got to take my sister from Bakersfield to be in the officers club with me, and when I first got in San Francisco, I know that Harvard gets the good breaks all the way. In Harvard, I got my choice of whether to be with bomber pilots, transportation command, or what command. All the graduates got their choice. I don't know of any that didn't. And also, so I picked 4th Air Force, which is San Francisco. I picked fighter plane because I was going to be in the war. I wanted to be a real part of it. That's one thing. And they gave me good leave when I came out. As a enlisted man, I'd be in a hovel someplace, but they put me up in the Palace Hotel before I went to Hamilton Field. That's one thing. In Tonopah, Nevada, it was awful cold. It was just a plain old desert. Now it's a resort place, but it wasn't then. We got to go into, wasn't Las Vegas, I guess the town of Tonopah. They had a hotel there and gambling, but we weren't there, we were out in the country. And a friend of mine, and from Bakersfield, what is his name? Dick? Can't think of his name. I wish I could because it's part of history. And it'll come up. But he was in an engineering outfit in the Army, which is right down the road from where our base was over at Tonopah. I say down the road about 2 or 3 miles. We were out about 20 miles. He had a big sign up because we were there in January of 1943. And that big sign said, Camp Frosty Balls. I thought that was funny. Saw that on the way into Tonopah. I got to go to Tonopah twice, and Goldfield, Nevada is over that way. That's another thing. Then in what events in Santa Rosa? Oh, Santa Rosa, we got a guy from Notre Dame that he was the special service officer that preceded me. Yes, I have other events to tell you. And he taught us the basketball and this. He's from Notre Dame. He was I don't know, he was a champion boxer. He's a boxer from Notre Dame, and he had a semi-flattened nose. And a good guy. And went to Harvard and put through the grinder to be a statistical officer. But and I put everybody in their groups, in their squadron. When they'd come in, they'd come to me. I say everybody, all the enlisted men, and the officers except the pilots. The operations officers took charge of assigning the pilots after we got into Britain. But over on the continent, the first week we were over there, we were down on a little beachhead kind of, and we couldn't go any place or do anything. And at night there was nothing to do except they gave us a couple of B movies to watch in a barn. That was our movie theater. And we lived in tents, in pup tents kind of deal there at first. And then we got bigger tents. And I couldn't replace anybody. This is the war going on. We couldn't have people coming in. We were right down the beach. So they gave me a big trunk of paperback books and gave me a tent to be in and had enlisted men come in there, spend their time. And they were all complaining because there's nothing for them to do. No work to do on the planes or anything else. The weather was bad. Couldn't fly, foggy. And so this went on for about a week or so. And I went to the commanding officer and said, and I'd heard that down the road near Cherbourg, somebody had got a USO show already. So I went to the commanding officer and said, Joe, Colonel, I guess he was Major Bickle. I wish you'd talk to Joe, and that's the name of our special service officer, to see if he couldn't get us a USO show or something. The enlisted men, their esprit de corps is not good. They're all complaining. They're all lonesome. They got nothing to do. Can't go anyplace. And commanding officer, Major Bickle, says, could you do any better? I said, well, if I couldn't, I'd turn in my bars. I really didn't mean that. I was first lieutenant at the time. And he says, reclassify yourself. I was also the classification officer. I said, I can't do that. I went to Harvard, business school. I'm a statistical officer. He said, you heard me, reclassify yourself. So I did. I became a special service officer. And I had a lieutenant who was assistant. He became a statistical officer. And so I hated it because Joe was a good friend of mine. They sent Joe back to England. I was a special service officer. So I went to higher headquarters, which is wing headquarters, and said, hey, we got to have a USO show. I've been appointed. They expect me to do a job. And I got to have some more modern movies and not those old reprints. And by God, they gave me Spike Jones and his City Slickers. Now, you probably never heard them, but you want to get old. That's a historical group. And they're Holiday in Windsor, something like that. Look it up. You'll really learn something. It's the lousiest song you ever heard, banging, banging, jumping around. But they came, and I tell you, some of our pilots gave them our pistol, their pistol for souvenirs, and I was all of a sudden a hero. I was nothing as a statistical officer to the people because I couldn't help anybody. All I could do is sign them. And so I got a letter from the commanding general commanding me for the esprit de corps of our group, and that was given to me when we moved to Brittany, and also my promotion to captain. So that's an event I'll never forget. And then I was, after the Marne River, I had USO show there, and the Marne River overflowed and flowed in, not big, but into our tents about this high. So we moved from there to Rosieres. And the commanding officer says, hey, you're doing pretty good special service. I want you to take charge of post exchange. We're just going to set one up where the guys could get candy and buy candy and this, that, and the other. And I said, he said, will you take it? Now, he could have said, you take it, like he did the other. I said, I will if you give me Sergeant Slotin to be my head man. Sergeant Slotin had an AJCT score, I think that's what it is. Anyway, an intellect score of 143, I think. Mine was 110, I think. 110 or higher, maybe 120. Anyway, they gave me Sergeant Slotin, and at Hertzganara, when I set up our little post-exchange deal, Sergeant Slotin drew double PX ration for our whole group. He drew from the 1st Army, all of our PX rations, and he drew from the 3rd Army. That's General Patton's Army, the 3rd Army, and General Hodges, I think it was the 1st Army. I had a wonderful time. I was only really afraid 2 or 3 times. I had no transportation all the time through England. Couldn't beg or borrow any, because I couldn't do any favor to the transportation department. So we got over into France before I was, maybe just when I was appointed special service officer. I got a Jeep and one of my men, and we got down into some forest, and all of a sudden we got trapped between 2 artillery barrages. The American Army fighting the German Army, and they're going shells overhead each way. At least we thought they were. So we got out of there. we were looking for German vehicles that they'd left behind, because when they departed, if they had any problem at all, they'd leave them. So my man was a mechanic, I think, that was with me. And if we could fix one up and get it and repair it, we'd have transportation. So that was a funny thing. Also, when we got in Erskine, we played softball. We had dances, brought it, in my job, go to a hospital or 2 and get nurses to come to dance with the guys. So those are events that show up. And another thing I'm not happy with, but it's what happens with our government today and every place else. Guys get in the government, they get in a position. They get to make demands. 2 of our pilots flew from our base near Nuremberg to someplace there in England just to get a couple of bottles of scotch and bring it back, because we were short of liquor. when I was an enlisted man, first going in, I found out how the government works. Hammers were selling for about 50 cents a piece, and we were paying some outfit, and I was a clerk then, $5 for hammers. They weren't worth $5. That's the government game. The government deal, so many people get involved, the costs go up. Work on private enterprise. Be what you're worth. Be the best we can, and the Lord will take care of you. I think I've overtaken my time, but I enjoyed talking to you fellas.
Were there any other personnel that were particularly inspirational to you?
What?
Any other personnel that were particularly inspirational to you?
All kinds of them. All kinds of them. At Rosier's, I stayed, they assigned me quarters in a room on the second floor of the mayor's house. Now, the mayor's house wasn't much, but it was 2-story. It had no bathrooms. They had an outhouse about the back, but no seat. They just had a crack in the floor about 3 inches wide. You better hit it. And I had a couple of enlisted men make me a privy. So we had 2 privies in the backyard. Mine had a seat. I tried to get to use mine, and they wouldn't do it. They had their habits there. And that's one thing. Another thing is, while we were there, I also was put in charge of what we call the Pioneer Press. Remember, we're the Pioneer Mustang Group. And I had a guy in my little command named Chester Leathers. And he was a typical sad sack. He got promoted to corporal maybe about 20 times and busted those 20 times. He wore his pants where they practically drag on the ground, and his sleeves clear down over his hands. And he wrote a few comments for my Pioneer Press, and it very well received. Got a lot of comments from the various groups, because it's for the whole group. And he asked me one time, "Captain, you mind if I write a little letter on the outfit?" I said no. And he wrote it, and he criticized the commanding officers. Well, I tell you, I was called in. They not only criticized me, they took away my position as the head of the Pioneer Press because the officers couldn't stand the criticism. And all he was doing was telling the truth as he saw it. So that's an interesting incident. Yes, there's another incident that before we went in England, we were back in England now. And one of our squadron commanders, I forget why he left, was he shot down or what, but another commander came in who had been in General Renault's Flying Tigers over in China. And he took command of the 356 Squadron. And the fellows in that squadron said, he's not much of a personality on the ground, but in the air he's a general. And this fella named Colonel Howard, James Howard, isn't it? And he wrote a book. If you ever get a chance, get a hold of it. Anyway, we had about 15 aces in our group, maybe more. An ace is a pilot that shoots down 5 or more confirmed killed aircraft. He was an ace or a double ace. In our group, and he had been an ace already over in China. Anyway, he was flying an escort to a group deep in Germany, and with all the ack and the action they had, he started flying home alone. He got lost from the group because they fly at high altitudes and all over the place. And he's tooling home, and he saw a group of bombers. So he said, I'll just fall in behind them, kind of. And he did. And then he looked up, and he saw a whole group of Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitt planes ready to pounce on him. And he tooled around, got in behind them, knocked off the bottom one, the tail end, and then flew right in the middle of them and broke the whole group up. The Bomber Command sent him a big picture of their group and said, you saved our lives. And they confirmed he shot down 6 of their planes and broke up their whole attack squadron or group. And it indicates that there's probably about 20 or 30 in the group. That's quite a story, and it's true. And because of that, he got promoted to Brigadier General and got the Congressional Medal of Honor. And he was taken out of combat because they didn't want him to get killed. He's the only pilot to get the Congressional Honor in the American forces in World War II, in European theater. Colonel James Howard. Tell one story, another one comes up. Like, you think your story is by basis. And I'll say that another thing is that I was single, and we were told that silk stockings were really in demand bad. So I bought a couple of pairs of silk stockings so I might have some impression on some beautiful lady along the line. And also, you know, I was only 22 years old, really 9 days after I joined, 8 days after I joined the Army Air Corps. My birthday's on the 10th, I joined on the 2nd. So I didn't know much about liquor. But I bought a bottle of Four Roses, that was popular at that time. I carried that blooming bottle all around the United States and clear over into Europe. And so there's 2 stories in one. First of all, I saved, and I should have given it to some girl in England, because the English people were the most impoverished people of all the people we saw during the war. They really sacrificed. Americans were scared right after Pearl Harbor. Bakersfield was scared. We thought people were invading us. Anyway, so I thought I'd save this for France. So I get over to France, and I find the Germans were in many places way ahead of Americans in life. They had modern bathrooms in Germany. They had stuff in Germany they didn't have in France. And the girls, the German guys treated the French girls real well, where nobody treated the English well except the Limeys, and they didn't know how to treat girls. So, and then after, I think it was at Herzogenaurach, that Major Espy came to me one day. They all knew they didn't know I had the silk stocking, but they knew it. And I don't remember what I did with silk stocking. But anyway, they weren't very much use in France. Girls didn't need them. The Four Roses, they only cost me $5 for a bottle of Four Roses. And he offered me $30 for my bottle. And I said, well, I'm not going to drink it. Give me your $30, and I sold it. But I probably spent a couple $100 worth of time carrying that thing all around the continent of the United States and over there to sell it. You couldn't get bourbon over there. You could get Scotch, and you could get, in England, Scotch and gin, but no bourbon. And then, so, also another thing is that both the enlisted man and in the group headquarters, in fact, he was a roommate of mine. As an enlisted man, I got to know the chaplain in Oklahoma City at Will Rogers Field, and I got to read the Battle Hymn of the Republic over the radio because of him, which is, if you don't know the Battle Hymn of the Republic, read it. It was a northern song which my mother was not happy about because my family are all Southerners. My great-great-grandfather was a cousin of the president of the Confederacy. What was his name?
Jefferson Davis.
Huh?
Jefferson Davis?
Yeah, Jefferson Davis. And my roots are in the South, but I'm a Californian, first one born here. Born in El Centro, raised in Brawley, came to Bakersfield at 15 years old. I've had a wonderful life. And anyway, this helped this man a little bit with some of the fellows he had some problem with. And then in group headquarters, the chaplain was a fellow from Pennsylvania, and I got to be his good friend. And he and a fellow at the head of the Salvation Army, girls that gave out coffee, and the adjutant and a group communication officer, 5 of us were in one Quonset hut, was our roommates over there in England. The other guys ate my cookies. And we got to be pretty good friends. The first night in England, we were at the base. Warplanes came over from Germany, right over our base. But they couldn't see us, we were all blacked out. And we all went out and had deep, about as far as deep as from the ground to where the glass starts, or the opening stops. Foxhole, you might call them. We go out there, and when those planes came over, feared they'd bomb us. The second week, we just stayed in our beds. Because they weren't looking for us. They were going to London to try to bomb London. That's the interesting thing. And anyway, this chaplain is a great guy, and he's dead now, of course. All those I know about are dead. The peculiar thing is that the communications officer who I didn't get along well with, he got to be a major. His name was Thomas Davis. He wound up, he was a what you'd call an Ivy League graduate, and he wound up living in Bakersfield, became an attorney, and was a partner with Vincent DeGiorgio. But he died a few years ago. And our adjutant was a flight officer. A flight officer is a fellow who's halfway between an enlisted man and being a commissioned officer. And after the war, they promoted him to major. And I can't think of what his name is right now. He's my roommate, too. Those two were buddies. With the Salvation Army guy and one of our pilots and I, we kept the crap table going busy in the officers club most of the time. I'm telling you, a lot of things would be out of school if the war wasn't over. But they're little things. What else? Oh, I can't think of his name. And I should. He attended conventions afterward. Well, I've given you, as I say, more than what you can probably digest, and I don't mind if you edit it somewhat. So, thank you for listening. You've been good students. Oh, I did want to say, I am a Christian, and that's one reason why I palled with the chaplain a lot. But the chaplain is a sinner just like the rest of us. He had some problems,
Yes.
same as we have. I think the hierarchy up there got him to drink a little bit, which he normally wouldn't have done. He was married to a lovely wife, I knew her, but I didn't have any ties like that. And I had some problems too, though, but I'm not going to go into those. I mentioned some of them slightly, but all of us do. I believe that every one of us, without exception, are saved. Pardon me, not saved. All of us are sinners. And some of us have been saved by the grace of God. That's what I mean. I believe I'm saved. I believe I'll go to heaven. And I really had a life experience in the service. And I would say any young man that wants a job, the service, particularly in the Air Force, is not dangerous unless you're enlisted men, because they do everything they can to protect our air bases. Our air bases and even out in the sticks. Oh, another interesting thing I didn't tell you is that I saw General Eisenhower. He visited our base. Our guys, one of our squadron group commander, the one that made me change my classification, took him around the front lines in an airplane. Well, that was a thrill to see him. Also, before the invasion, we were called to stand up there in Maidstone, and right as close as you are to me stood General Patton, and also by him was Joe Louis, the famous boxer, the first, well, not the first, but well-known boxing champion. And Joe Louis was just going around like this, he was kind of punch drunk, and General Patton couldn't talk without 5 or 6 passwords in every sentence. But he said, we're going to beat so-and-so out of these Germans. We're going to go do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. And he was a really good general, but he was overzealous general. And I met some of his enlisted men and officers in Paris or other places when I had a little leave. And they say, yeah, old blood and guts. Our blood and his guts. So that was a thrill, though, just to see Patton. And very experienced. Oh, talk about education. That's one of my big mistakes. I think it was Cambridge, which I had a chance to take leave and go to Cambridge to school over there for whatever reason, I forget what. And I turned it down instead to party in London. I enjoy my partying, but right now I regret I didn't go to Cambridge. Or wherever it was. It was up there in the middle of England. But that's an opportunity I had. And we all have opportunities in life. We always have, seemed like, 2 roads, like on Highway 99, which comes over the mountain, or I-5, it splits off down there by Willow Ridge. You go one road or the other road. We always think that when you got a choice, what's really the best thing to do? And I recommend you even think about it hard, and if possible, pray about it. Say, God, give me direction, which one I go, and do it. Because if I would die because of my sins, I'm a dead man. But I believe God has forgiven my sins. I repent of them, and think I'm going to heaven. Hope you guys do too. That's it.
Well, thank you for coming here today. And
any other question?
no, thank you for coming here today and telling
Well, thank
us.
you for standing it.